I went, you know, literally kicking and screaming, not exaggerating, from the house. My mom would pull me out of bed, and I'd be whining about it. We're going to church, you know. And my dad wasn't too keen on it. I wasn't directly opposed to it, but he went because my mom wanted him to go. So 10 and then high school and whatnot, I was kind of more outspoken against Christianity, to be honest. I mean, it was kind of, it's not true. It's just a written book by a bunch of guys. Like, there's just no way. And so, I mean, I went to church camp and things, but it it was slightly impactful, but not really. And then, it all came not crashing down, but changed dramatically. It was the weekend before I was supposed to go to college, excuse me. And I was in church and singing a worship song that I liked, and like nobody shared a gospel message with me or anything like that. But all of a sudden, like it's basically as clear as day. I hear God say, like, you're in rebellion and you've grieved my heart. And that was,
wow.
Yeah. So
how old were you?
I was 18.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So that was my first like experience with God per se, was him basically saying, you're in the wrong and I'm right. And nobody told me anything. It was just love of God in me. And I remember being tears and sobbing because all of a sudden I was like, okay, yeah, you're right. Like, I am in the wrong and you are in the right. And so after that, I went to PLU, was dating a girlfriend at the time who I followed to PLU in Tacoma. And, we were sleeping together and I was like, okay, that's not right now that I'm a Christian. And so stopped that and then ended things with her. And, generically since then, it's been, I guess, more and more reorientating my life to, you're right and I'm wrong, And so, yeah, so that's part of the story. At the time, met my wife at PLU, got together, went to a church that was solid to start, but turned into a near cult experience. And so I affectionately call it Crazy Church. And there was a lot of good that was in that church, and there was a lot of damage happened in that church. Wow. Excuse me. Which is just really unfortunate because there was so much good, and I am kind of who I am because of that. But at the same time, there's a lot of people that completely left the faith because of that church.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Very embittered.
So I'm kind of curious. So
that's okay.
So, like, what was good and what was bad? What caused the bad side for people to become to the point of leaving the faith?
There was an abuse of leadership. One person in particular that people thought had checks and balances, but had a bunch of yes people below him that didn't keep the guy in check. And it was not a denominational church, so there was no church structure, which isn't necessarily wrong with that. But the good was a passion for Jesus, a passion for knowing his word, and a passion for like growing in sanctification and believing in the gifts of the Spirit, and in particularly hearing God's voice. And which those were all good things. But what happened over time was kind of this leaning on the Spirit, but not leaning on conventional wisdom, leaning on the word. It was, okay, now the Spirit, leading us here. And it was like, okay, we're not a church, we're a mission organization. And we're like, what? Huh? And then it was, a lot of burden. Okay, God's asking you to do this, or this is what God's saying over your life, in fulfilling that. And where I absolutely believe and think that God speaks, it was a very chaotic, very burdensome, very, if you're not
legalistic type.
No, not legalistic. More so like almost like Pentecostal in the sense of like that. But it was a very heavy-handed. We have the right doctrine and other people don't. We're a little bit better than them. It was, church attend. If you don't show up on church, you might miss the move of God, and you'll miss it forever. Kind of an idea. There was this idea of self-sacrifice, which I think is good, and mixed with that was self-sacrificing more or less everything for the sake of the gospel, but it was like everything all the time, every day, sacrificing your marriage, sacrifice at work. And so there was no, you lost who you were because you're always trying to do for everyone else all in just giving and giving and giving and giving. And even like if your kids know, like your kids are great and yes, they're a priority, but really you should be doing these other more important things.
Wow.
Um,
That would burn you out, and it's misguided.
very much so. And I think the challenge, I think the challenge was is it didn't start there. Like it wasn't that. It was this really beautiful, vibrant, primarily college-based community with an impassioned leader in a good way, and this sense of God is speaking to us and God is doing things, and we want to pursue Him and grow in Him, and we want to give our lives away generically for the gospel, which, like, yeah, that's good, like, and it is. And then over time, we're talking 5-10 years, it turned into this thing of like, no, give more. And I remember that piece about the church. We're not a church, we're a mission organization. These random things would come from the pulpit, and these comments were made that were like, that doesn't make any sense. Like that just doesn't fit. And I remember one time where I was like, okay, no, like I can't do this. The pastor at the time was basically like, the church in America is dead and God's given up on it. And I'm like, oh no, like the church is His bride. Like that's not how this works. Like that's not fundamentally theologically true. And I don't agree with that. And at that point, I was like, no, you're just taking it too far. And when you're in the midst of something like that, I didn't know all those things were wrong at the time. And you're in this climate that like everybody else is agreeing with you. And there's not anything glaringly wrong from the outside that someone would comment on it to say, hey, this is really unhealthy. You had people from time to time that would leave the church that would make a comment of, okay, this is too much. And you would just be like, oh, okay, like this isn't for you, but you're going to miss out on what God has for you, and there was this idea that if you did those things, you were rebellious, right? But I think that it's like, like what is the saying? Like, how do you kill a frog? You throw it in lukewarm water and then you turn it and you slowly raise the temperature. And I think that's what happened is you had these nuanced changes and it blew up. I mean, the church was probably around 400 at one point in time, and it had, and it still does to a degree, ties with YWAM and things like that were really cool. And off and on, I would probably say of the 400 in attendance at that time, I would probably guess 3 out of 4 of those people that want nothing to do with the faith anymore. Where I run into them afterwards, and I haven't gone to church since. I'm so embittered by it. I think in large part because in order to figure things out, you had to do some really hard work of what was true and what was good and what was not and what was unhealthy, and that took years of work to sift through what was healthy, what do I agree with, what don't I agree with, what is my theology, who is God to me, and it took a lot of work. And there's a lot of emotional damage from those things.
Sorry.
So I think a lot of the people were just hurt and embittered and just like, screw it, I'm done. Like I don't want to do that. And so that was easy. And for me, I was like, no, like I'm not tossing the towel on stuff. That doesn't make sense. God was in this in part, but He wasn't here all the way. So yeah, and I think and with my ex-wife, I think there is some of that. Like I remember when my marriage ended, we were meeting with Mark and Kelly, and remember her, not Kelly, but my ex-wife, basically being like, I don't trust leadership, because of that the incident in Crazy Church. And I remember being like, holding and you were bawling because you forgave everybody. And you're going back and picking up that old burden that you've already forgiven, and you're going back and claiming as if it never happened. But it was like this easy thing as an excuse to be like, nope, I was broken, I'm damaged, I'm just going to pick it up again. Because I know how. And I'm like, no, you forgave. Like you were different. Not Mark and Kelly, but past leadership. But you just went back to it and said, okay, I'm just going to be embittered. And I'm like, and that was an interesting thing. And part of my divorce was kind of this external blaming, of everything. And there wasn't any ownership of what could you change? What could you do? It's like, no, it's all these people. Like, sure, other people might have made mistakes in their lives, or I'm sure I did. But like, and what role do you play in that? And it's not me. Okay, well then nothing can be done, because if you have no agency, then there's nothing you can do. Like you can't change it.
Right.
So that was interesting to see. And my ex-wife isn't a follower of Jesus anymore. She believes in crystals and energy and all that stuff. She went the complete opposite direction. Yeah. So, but there's that. So.
So were you married in that church?
Yeah, we were actually. Yeah. Yeah. The church is in a much better place now. That pastor left. The associate pastor, who actually is the one that married us, took over, and I would never attend that church, but I also would never say anybody should not go there. There's some things theologically that I'm just like, I'm uncomfortable with that.
Yeah.
But nothing.
And this was local around?
Yeah, Tacoma.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were married in that church. Yeah, I mean, we went to that church for almost a decade. So, that's just crazy. So. Yeah, you just want pets. You just have that big stretch. But yeah, and that's kind of like, the demise of my marriage. You probably don't, probably know a little bit of at least what I've shared, but, I was married 15 years, 3 kids, and, marriage imploded and all kinds of horrible things happened, took place, nothing that I caused, but I had to experience, unfortunately. In the midst of it, I was like, okay, this isn't God. I'm not angry at God. I don't blame God. He's not the author of this. It's not, where it's like, this isn't, I remember, I was the one that told my kids that we were separating. My ex-wife wouldn't tell them. And I had to go along, even though it wasn't my choice. And I remember.
How long ago was this?
5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 5 years. Do you know my marriage story? I don't know how much.
No. Okay. Sure, please.
Anyway, so my ex-wife and I were married. I'll give you the synopsis, and you're welcome again to ask any questions because it's a complicated one. Anyway, long story short, we were married 15 years, and I would probably say 9 of those were good. Like 9 of those were like typical marriage and all that stuff. In the last 6, something was off, things changed, I don't know what. And there was a lot of times where I'd be like, hey, something's off, can we talk? And things always were my fault for some reason, and I was the one to blame, and she didn't have any responsibility of it anyway. So then it was Labor Day weekend. My ex-wife had an affair with a woman, and that was never part of that. Being a lesbian was never part of my ex-wife's story for her entire life. And she had an affair with a woman that was also married heterosexually, who had 3 children. And so they ended up leaving both of their husbands for each other, and they're now married. And so, yeah.
Is that a first time for both of them?
As far as I can't speak to her now wife, but from my ex-wife, yes, that was. Yeah. And so, yeah, and it wasn't just that. There was a lot of things that were negatively handled by my ex-wife, just in terms of the kids, and at times still not nearly as much. That's okay. She just
Gracie.
For love. That's fine. Yeah, and so it was just a matter of things were handled horribly, even though she was counseled to handle it completely differently. And she's like, nope, I want this woman around. I don't care what the impact on my kids. I don't care what it means. This is what I want, which is really unfortunate. And so I tried to work in the marriage for a couple of weeks, and it was very, very clear that she wanted out. And so I said, okay, like I will pay, double your deposit because you don't have income, and I will pay full child support until we get officially divorced, which was, I had to work side jobs just to cover my own basis and my own expenses.
Wow.
For about almost a year, and just so you can, be out. And, she wanted to be friends afterwards, and I was like, I am not friends with anybody that treats me that way. Like, I'm just not. Like, it's just, I don't do that.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to be your friend. I'm not going to play nice. I'll be nice to you, and I'll love you in the sense of like, I want your best, but this is a business relationship now, and I'm not interested in doing that. So, so we ended up divorcing.
It had to take a toll on you.
It did, yeah. Yes. My experience of divorce is unique from almost anybody else's, and I don't mean that because I'm a special snowflake. But when you are heterosexually married and your wife has an affair with a woman, it is a unique experience. And one of the questions that you ask is, did she ever really love me? Because in an affair with the same gender that you're married to, there's like, okay, she fell in love with somebody else, or you can see. But in my marriage, you're like, was it ever real? I don't know. And you try at times to figure out, like, were there signs? Was there, and There wasn't really. But you try and it's so dizzying and so confusing because this person that you think you know, I mean, I knew my ex-wife for almost 20 years, is now literally completely different than the 20 years and, at the time, nearly 40 years that everybody has known this person. And not only that, but I was really close with their family. And none of them speak to me anymore. Not by my choice, but that's what they chose. And being an only child and my parents are down in Portland, like I lost the family in the process.
Yeah.
And in the midst of it though, like I remember really distinctly, a couple of things. And number one, going through it, like I said, it wasn't God's fault, but it was like, this is a moment in time. And I'm going to sit in the mess and ugliness of it because I'm not going to let this define me. Like, I'm not going to let it break me. I can't. And so I'm going to sit and do the really hard work of sitting in my sadness and, the trauma of it and go through hit after hit after hit because I'm not going to let it define me. I'm not going to let this ruin my life.
Yeah.
And the other thing was, I remember distinctly, it was a really interesting encounter I had with God. It was the night she moved out. We agreed that she would take the kids and they would spend the first night with her. And so she got half the stuff in the house, more or less. Whatever she wanted. She's moving to an apartment. And she moved everything out. And I remember sitting in my living room just weeping and just gut sobbing for about an hour and a half and just sitting in it and just like, this sucks. This isn't like it was like, so like I was reading the Experiencing God book by Henry Blackaby. Me and my girlfriend are doing that right now. And like in there was this prompt that was really interesting. It said, have you ever prayed for something for an extended period of time and had never gotten it? And I remember I was like, yeah, my marriage. I remember like praying, God, like change me or change my life. It does not matter. But like it wasn't things that were bad. Like, but you could just like something like I couldn't draw her out. I could not like, you were not responding emotionally, And I'm like, yeah, that I could. God's answer to that prayer was no. Like, I'm not going to change either of you. I'm going to let you both have the decisions that you want, And in the midst of that, I'm just that night I'm gut sobbing for an hour and a half and just sitting in that pain and that agony. And I remember sitting in the house, and the house physically sounded different because the furniture wasn't in there.
Sure, right.
So when you talked, it sounded
differently. Absolutely.
And I remember the next morning waking up, I was by myself, and I remember waking up in the house, and the peace of God was so thick in the house. And for years I had prayed for it to be like that. It's just that the presence of God would be in my home. And my first thought was, it wasn't me. It wasn't my fault you weren't here. Because now that she's gone, like it was instantaneous. And I was like, wow, like there's something with her that it was like, once she left, God's presence showed back up in my home that I wanted for years.
That had to be so reassuring.
It
right?
was.
Oh, this is, you're with me, you're here. This is really one thing you prayed for a long time, and there it is.
Yeah, and it was it was a very big relief, because in the midst of this, like, I have no idea if this is my fault or if I caused something, not her to have the affair, but like, as a husband, could have done something differently? And of course, there are things, but like, you don't know. You're a mess at this point in time,
Yeah.
And so for this to be like, man, it
Gracie.
wasn't me. It wasn't. I'm not the cause of you not wanting to be her God. And so,
one of the things that I can't help but think about is that where my mind went to was you'd shared that she's left the faith, and I guess my thought or my question is that you made the comment about did she ever love me, and where I went, my brain went, did she ever love God, right? Like, did you ever really love God? Did you ever really know God? Did God ever really know you? To make that move away so dramatically, in that we're flawed, but God isn't, right? And it's like, is it at some level I think you would have to wonder that. It's like, how could she go from here, loving me, loving Jesus, and then go over here and rejecting all of it? That would be hard to process.
Yeah, and I think for me, it wasn't quite as hard to process in the sense of like, it's not that I can see the trail, but like I think a lot of times, like the idea of Romans 1, God's wrath, right? God's judgment kind of idea. And I think oftentimes a lot of evangelicals will be like, God's going to smite you or whatever in terms of your decisions. And I don't agree with that whatsoever. But what I saw in this instance and what I saw in my marriage was, okay, I'm trying to have this sense of connectedness to you emotionally in all the other ways. And I'm coming more than halfway, but there's no movement on your side to do that part. And between that and other areas of life with friends and other things that had nothing to do with her sexuality, but there was this kind of hands up, no, I'm not going to do it. Like, and from just a basic non-Christian connection perspective. And I think in large part, I don't have any question as to whether Mac's wife did love God. I think she did. There's genuineness with that. And in the process, I think what did happen though, became lots and lots of no's. Like, no, I don't want to be vulnerable to that.
Oh.
No, I don't want God's character in this issue because I've already given this much. Or no, and this was, like a big one for her. No, I don't want to forgive again. And I think that there was not a willingness to say yes again. And so over time there became, I want to do this, and I know God wants me to do this, but I'm just not, I know either through I can't or I won't or excuses. And I think over time, I think what really happened was like, God was like, okay, like I'm not going to push you. Like I love you and I want your best, but I'm also not going to force you. And if that's the direction that you want to go, I'm not going to bless it, but I'm also not going to stop you, And I think just like through all of us, our investment in our relationship with God with time, I think we can stop investing that quality time in all those things, not just quiet time, but like vulnerability and things like that. And because of that, we can get more and more distant from God, to the point where it's kind of like, when you're married, the saying is two ships passing in the night, right? Where you're like, yeah, I have a spouse, but they're really more like a roommate, And I think that you can get that way with God. And I think that's in part what happened to her, that it was a bunch of no, and I'm not willing to do that. And God was like, okay, like,
right.
You can choose that. I don't want you to, but like, I'm always here, and I'll let you have your way. And I think that's ultimately what she chose. Which for me, that's one thing. But then I'm like, all right, leave the kids out of it. Just be an adult. But that was the more challenging piece. Because the kids have had to deal with all that. So
yeah, that was kind of where I wanted to ask, like, how's it impacted the kids and stuff. It's complicated for you as an adult. It's got to be even more complicated for them as kids.
It is. I mean, I think it is very complicated. I mean, the oldest one doesn't speak to her mom whatsoever anymore. She lives with me full time for the last year and a half. In large part, how her mom treated her. It had nothing to do with the affair. All my kids know about the affair now. They've all asked separately. And I've told my kids, I'll answer any question, but you need to be prepared for the answer.
Right.
And so if you want to know the answer, I will tell you. And so they know not all the gory details, but they know a bit. And I think all the kids absolutely love their mom. I don't have any question about that. Even the one that doesn't speak to her, I think she loves her. But her mom is not a mom to her that was nice or kind or a mom figure, and really in many different ways over years mistreated her. And so it was never about the divorce or her faith, but it was, how she treated, everybody and other people. And I think there's a lot of complexities to. Yeah, so quick recap would basically be my divorced single dad, 3 kids. My divorce ended with my ex-wife having an affair with a woman that was not part of her story, and that even in the midst of it, God, I knew it wasn't God's fault, and that God was deeply with me in the midst of that, and that sitting in it, um, and being in some really difficult emotions is part of what got me through that time period. And so the question being, how my kid's dealing with it, or took it, or whatnot. So my oldest lives with me full time, has for a year and a half, and I think all the kids love their mom. In their own ways. And I think my oldest wants to be close with her mom, even though she doesn't speak to her and has had to set some very firm boundaries. That I didn't ask her to. She met with a therapist, and it was kind of her own decision. She just came up to me and said, "Hey, Dad, I'm thinking of living with you full time." And I was like, "Oh, okay, you're welcome to, kid." And so I think, though, how she was treated was really poor. There was a lot of, there was just a lot of, if I had to summarize it into guess, my oldest and I are really close, just practically speaking. And I think that because she's the oldest in particular, my ex-wife took some of her bitterness and perspective out on me and unloaded it onto my daughter. And that didn't go well. And there were just other, and there were other things in terms of pressure from my ex-wife to be a certain way that my daughter just isn't. And her wife made fun of my daughter, and my ex-wife would chime in and point and laugh at my oldest daughter for stuff that didn't need to be laughed about, and just kind of mocked. And my ex-wife would make comments of, "Well, I don't think you really need to go to therapy. I don't want to go to therapy. I don't think you need to go to therapy. I don't want to pay for it." Over and over and over again. Where it puts so much pressure on a kid that she's just trying to not be depressed. So I think my middle kid is autistic. She was diagnosed a year and a half ago, and she's has what's called a PDA profile, so pathological demand avoidance. And so she actually lives with her mom full time right now. We got in a disagreement like 5 weeks ago. And by disagreement, I mean nobody understands why she's making the decision that she is, but she's 15, and so. But my middle kid loves her mom and doesn't really care, like whatever life she lives, she's fine with.
Has that been hard for you?
Her living with her mom?
Yeah.
Yes and no. But that piece has been hard. And what I mean by that is my middle child, who I love dearly, is at the same time the most difficult human being I've ever engaged with my entire life. Wow. And I don't mean that from a teen perspective. I mean that since she was little. And it comes from the autistic PDA profile. So the pathological demand avoidance is something that basically is they will avoid anything that is perceived as a demand, even slightly, even a demand on themselves. They will avoid it at all costs. For example,
I've never heard of that.
It's newer terminology in the U.S., but it exists in the U.K. for a while. So there's not a lot of studies on it, but I will say I find it very true for my middle kid. That just say for example, if my middle kid had a hobby, and this is in various ways a repeated pattern, and they're doing the hobby and then they don't do it. As a parent, I'm like, hey, like, why don't you go do that hobby? You really enjoyed that hobby. She's like, nope. And all of a sudden, because I suggest she should do it, all of a sudden, I'm not going to do it. I will not do it. And you're like,
wow.
Exactly. You're like,
wow,
dude, you love this hobby. No, I don't. No, you've been doing this for months. Like, you've talked about having a career as this. No, I don't want to do it anymore. And you're like, what do you do with that?
Right.
And
then you feel like you got to walk on the eggshells, probably,
yes.
right? Like,
oh,
I've got to
absolutely.
be super careful.
Well, and yes, and as a parent, I'm a pretty thoughtful parent, and I'm like, okay, my other two I do not have an issue with. Like, so I'm not being controlling. I'm not.
Right.
It's not too much pressure because both of my kids, other two kids, I'm really close with. But so it's challenging, and in this instance, because of that dynamic with her, neither of the other two children have a close relationship with her. They're very superficial with it. Because of that hot, cold, off, on, and she isn't, when our boundaries are articulated, she just avoids them. She doesn't care. She runs right over them. And so because of that, my oldest and my youngest have avoided her. Now that she's living with her mom full time, and why I say like it's hard in terms of like the positive and negative feelings I have, I feel a slight guilt over as a parent, is that now she lives with her mom, my stress level went from an 8 to a 1 because there's no action. And I'm like, oh, this is what a neurotypical family deals with. And I went from a difficult marriage for the last number of years to an imploding marriage to trying to survive as a single dad to trying to make sure my kids are not traumatized as much as they can be at their moms and make sure I'm absolutely the safe person and uphold all the things that I need to hold them just to get them out of high school to now that my other main stressor is out of the picture, like, oh, this is kind of nice. Like, I don't have to walk on eggshells and I can laugh with my kids and goof off and not fear I'm going to say something wrong that's going to piss her off. And I think also, like, I think I hold a bit of a unique perspective as a parent. I mean, I love my kid and, like, I am who I am and I'm a highly adaptable person, but I'm not for everybody in the sense of, like, I can't, maybe I'm not the best parent for her. Maybe my ex-wife is a better parent for her, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, so I hope that kind of, it's hard because I want to see her, but at the same time, like, it's not hard because I love her, and if that's what's best for her, then that's okay.
Yeah.
My son, he loves his mom dearly. They're really close, and I think at the same time, it's like he doesn't agree with a lot of his mom's actions, and because he was the youngest going through everything, he didn't really understand what my oldest was put through. So he doesn't fully understand her decision to live with me full time. But also he knows it was bad enough that, and she's very happy now, that like it's good for her. And so I think he's just now starting at the stage of wrestling through, who his mom is, who I am.
How old is he?
He's 12.
Okay.
Almost 13.
Okay.
And the interesting thing is all three of them love Jesus. I mean, in their own capacities. My oldest is going to be doing a YWAM DTS next year. And then middle one is still going to our youth group on the leadership team there. And then Maximus, the youngest, is playing on the youth worship band at his mom's church and is active in their youth group there. And he's trying to start a Bible club at school. And, he asked me the other day, he was like, Dad, like, how do you know when it's God talking to you? Like,
That's a great question.
It is. And so we talked about kind of my perspective on that was like, well, like, it's kind of like, when you come up the stairs and you start talking, like, I know it's you because I know your voice, right? Because we have a long history of relationship. So I've spent time with you, like, knowing how you word certain things and how you pronounce certain things and the rhythms of your sentence structure and things like that. I said, I could even tell when you're walking up the stairs that it's you versus your sister because I've paid attention and spent time with you. And I said, that's part of it. Like, God's voice because you tried to hear him and spent time with him so you recognize it. And, God's voice is always going to be peaceful. It may be very difficult. It may make you angry. It may make you fearful. But at the end of the day, when you think about it, ultimately there's peace in what he's asking you to do. Even though it's difficult. And I said, and it's never going to contradict scripture. It's never going to be like, okay, go, look at pornography or something. No, it's not. It's pretty clear. And so it was a fun experience. And so,
did he share? Did he think he was hearing something from God?
He did. He was trying to figure it out, and he wasn't quite sure what it was. And so and we were coming home from Costco. So I was like, okay, dude, like, let's just practice it. So like on the way home from Costco, we're like, okay, Jesus, like. And I said, one of the fun ways to do it is like if you pray and ask how God sees you, because sometimes he sees you differently than you see yourself. And so we prayed and he got this word protector. And I was like, oh, that's kind of really interesting. Actually, I said the two things that I got, one was that scene in Lord of the Rings, Gandalf, where he's like, you shall not pass, which is very much in line with a protector.
Totally.
And I said, the other one that I was like, dude, I haven't thought of this movie in decades, so it's got to be God. I said, it's the movie Rocky, and the coach in there is Mickey. And there's a scene at the end of Rocky where Rocky's really struggling, and Mickey gets up in his ear and kind of chews him out and to encourage him. And I said, I think you're kind of like Mickey. Like, I think you kind of, like, you can have that capacity, and encouragement is a word where it's like, literally is to breathe courage into somebody. It's not just pat them on the butt. It's when they're facing something difficult, like you breathe life into them so they can go do that really hard thing. And then we prayed for my middle kid because she wasn't she at the time she wasn't started not to live with us. And so I said, sometimes when you are facing somebody that's difficult, sometimes it's good to ask God, how do you see that person? Because he's going to see something differently than how you see that person. And so we prayed for her, and so he didn't get anything. And I said, I saw this vision, which was interesting because I thought about it the other day, and it came back to me again in a different way. And this vision of my middle kid, who was a really strong swimmer naturally, was swimming out in the ocean, and you got the sense of like, yeah, you can. And she was alone, and she was swimming a really long distance, and you got the sense of like, yeah, she can do it alone right now. But you knew in this vision that there was going to come a moment in the not too distant future that it was not going to be doable alone. And that was where like it's fine now, but it's not going to be in the future. And I was actually thinking about that the other day, and God gave me another piece of it where it was like she was swimming alone, and God was calling her to shore. No, like you need to come off the shore. Like you can't do this alone, kind of idea. And she's like, nope, I'm good. Nope, I'm good. Nope, I'm good. And like his thing was kind of like, you are now.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be in the future. So, yeah. So which was, and for me dealing with my middle kid being your mom's, it was like, okay, that also makes sense. And that's kind of one of the things. After my kid got diagnosed a year and a half ago with autism, and that was a long, not process, but many things had to happen till finally we got the right diagnosis for her. But since then, something had been off, and not about her being autistic, but just something I couldn't figure out. And there was something in me. I talked to my therapist and different things, and in her going to her mom's, I thought about it more, and I finally was able to put the finger on what it was. And it was like, oh, I haven't forgiven her for all of the things that she's done and how she's treated us as a family. So I literally wrote a list of like all the things I could remember. Like, okay, I forgive you for every time like you just were defensive for defensive sake. Or like, I forgive you for every time I would ask you to clean your room. Instead of cleaning your room, you just organized it intentionally so you didn't have to clean it. Or I forgive you for every time you left your stuff out and everybody wanted you to pick it up and you just made an argument as to why you shouldn't have to pick it up and just all this stuff, right? And so I spent, I don't know, an hour going through it. And it was funny because I was like, okay, now I feel better towards her, because I was like, I needed to, like, I'd forgiven my ex-wife, numerous times and forgiven my other kids for various things. But there was something that I was like, no, I had not continually forgave through as I went through something. Because I think for me, the way I've operated as a single dad is to not literally to survive, but head down, fist out, just take care of it. Like you got kids that are going through trauma, your own stuff, you gotta work through it, but at the same time, other things are priority. And so I was like, no, like I need to forgive on a continual basis because otherwise I'm gonna get trapped in an unhealthy response.
Yeah.
Not from a forgiven place, but from an offended or from a hurt or, different place.
It's not optional, man. Is it? It's not optional. You got to forgive. And you don't want that root of bitterness in your heart. And because, that forgiveness is for you. For you.
Yeah, the description I've heard, I don't know if I've heard, but I know I've thought of is anger and bitterness is like locking yourself in the prison and giving someone else the key.
Yeah.
The only way to let yourself out is to take back the key and let yourself out by forgiving.
Yeah. And I've heard this other people, but the first time I heard it was one of the guys in my men's group. He said that bitterness is like drinking poison, trying to kill the other person. That's an awesome process to go through, right? And it's needed. It's needed. I was a single dad for 8 years, and so I know the challenges of being a single dad. And there was 4 kids, and 2 of them were my stepkids, and they lost their mom. And so, yeah, it was challenging for me. It was very challenging for me, and I failed a lot. I failed a lot, to be honest with you. I wish looking back on it that I was in a better position. I knew God, and I didn't really know what it meant to really follow God and walk with God, um, and I stumbled a lot during that time, and yeah, I was a very broken person, and it's challenging being a single dad. There's just, you're dealing with a loss of a relationship, right? And my situation, my wife passed away from breast cancer. So everybody's grieving, and you're just trying to figure out, how do I get through today? And it's hard sometimes. It is there's um, figuring out that path is is complicated. It's not easy. And so actually, what you've been sharing, I've been thinking, I think you've done an amazing job, man. I want you to know that. That's really cool, because you've been walking with God through it and bringing Him into it, and that makes all the difference. And I did not, and I wish I had, but uh, uh, I had to learn a lot of these lessons kind of much later in life to to figure out what it really means to walk with God and to follow Jesus and hear His voice. Because back then, that was not what I was. That's not the way I was living my life.
Yeah, I think it's the only reason I survived. I mean, in well, literally. I mean, I remember, like, it was funny because I remember, I remember actually having PTSD. Like, I never had anything traumatic like that happen before in my life, but I remember, like, oh, this is legitimately PTSD. I remember being in multiple places, and all of a sudden, like, the finding out about the affair would literally flood me emotionally. I could picture it vividly as if I was there right now, and all those emotions just flood instantly back, as if I was happening all over again, and I was reliving the memory again. And I remember, like, because we tried working on things for a couple of weeks, and again, it was clear she wasn't gonna stay. So there was another, like, 4 weeks of, like, her getting ready to move out, and I found her apartment and getting all that ready. But she was continuing to go having all these affair times with her, girlfriend. And this is happening. I mean, there's no question. And she's like, oh, it's not. No, like, I literally know your iPhone location, and I know these people are lying about and other people would tell me information. Right? But I remember one time, I've thought about it since, coming back on a road near our house, and it was, November time or whatever, October, and so it was dark. And I remember, like, thinking my kids are going through this traumatic thing, and the road's 45 miles an hour, and there's a lake off the side, and this car was coming on ahead of us in the opposite way, and I was like, it would be so much easier to literally just have a head-on collision and just end it all, like, right now. That would be easier than what I'm going through. And I didn't, but if I didn't have the faith that I have and the community of people that I had around me, I don't know that I would have been that strong to not do that, to be honest. Because I know a number of guys that have been through things not as bad as me, and they've done some really stupid stuff that, like, they really regretted, And thankfully, that was the only real scenario that ever popped in my mind.
Tell me about the group of people that were around you there that was kind of supporting you through that.
I mean, I had my parents from Portland, and I had our church.
And you were at North Campus.
Yeah, it was at North Campus.
Yeah.
And so we met with Mark and Kelly very briefly after the affair came out, and to more or less see if we could repair things. And it was obviously not. Jeremy Kidd, who's on staff, who was a friend, like, really became, well, basically a brother now.
I didn't know that until.
Yeah,
that was so cool. It's like, man, you guys, I didn't realize that relationship existed between you two. That's so neat.
Yeah, literally every other Friday night, Jeremy comes over and we have man night. I'm in a relationship now, but he and I joke because he was kind of concerned, like, if I started dating, if that was going to go away. I was like, dude, bros before hoes. This is not changing.
That's awesome.
And even with his kid, he still comes over when he can, every other week. Yeah, I mean, Jeremy said something that was really very true and very freeing during my divorce when I talked to him about it, and he knew all the details, and he knows the vast majority because he was my soundboard for a number of years as just things were chaos, and not just during the affair. But he said, JT, with her having an affair, whatever you choose, whether you stay or whether you go, and whether you go in 2 months or 5 years from the marriage, you are righteous. From a biblical perspective, you are free. And to hear that, because I was meeting with a therapist, and my lesson learned is some therapists are great and some therapists are horrific. And I had a horrific one, unfortunately, for 4 years, but I didn't know anything about therapy. But I remember going through the affair, and he was kind of my support community per se, because he's my therapist. And he found out about the affair, and he actually met with her separately, and he wasn't supposed to tell me this, but he was like, JT, this is nothing that's ever come up on her. Like, this is literally out for everybody. Like, no. So, and I was talking about the affair, and I was like, okay, like, how long do I stick in this? And he's like, well, like, yeah, I call it the affair fog, and usually it lasts a year. And I was like, I have to be in this a year, like her going out and having affairs and being with this woman for a year. He goes, yeah, and then hopefully she comes out of it. And I'm like, do you understand the hell, literal hell? I'm home taking care of my kids, and she leaves and goes to have these affair instances with her girlfriend, and I just sit here and take this. He's like, well, yeah, and not like horrible advice, but for Jeremy to say like, whatever you feel like you need to do, you are blessed. It was such a relief, to be like, oh, because I didn't want to, even though this horrific thing happened, I didn't want to make the wrong choice, and not that there was a right choice, but like, I don't want to screw this up any more than it already is.
Yeah.
And so to be told from someone I trust, no, either way, you will be blessed, was such a relief. And I think that was one of the starting points for me to be like, okay, this is not going to work. I can't. Because even, 4, 6 weeks in with all these different times she was going to have these times with her girlfriend, I was like, I could barely survive 4 weeks. There's no way I can do it either. I can't. I have limits.
That would tear you up to bits.
Oh, even 4 weeks of it did. I was just shreds. I was losing weight, and so that community, I think, Harbor Cub really, and not just during the divorce, but like everybody loving on my kids, and it never felt like we are loving on you because your dad's going through a divorce. It just felt like we're just loving on your kids. Like, these are your kids, And I really appreciated that, and I really appreciated like my kids feel known and that they have like not everybody I would consider family, but people that deeply care about them, even though they may not know the kids fully, but they deeply care about them.
Yeah.
And
that is what churches should be like, right?
Oh yeah.
That's what makes North Campus so special.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the sense of community that exists there? Like for your kids, but like for you, but like for all of us, we all experience this strong connection of the people that are there, and you feel like you're loved from the pastor on down, right?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of that. And even had, Naomi visited GCU, and I had somebody come up to me on Sunday and like, oh, how was Naomi's trip to GCU? And I was like, oh, it's great, and kind of gave them a quick update, and they were like, hey, like we're praying about possibly contributing to her college. And I was like, and even if that doesn't happen, that's okay. But like, even that someone would consider that, like as a dad, as a single dad, because I would love to help my kids with college. I'm a single dad, dude. Like, I make decent money, but I don't make killer money. Like, and I've told my kids, like, if I was married, yeah, absolutely, I could help you. I couldn't pay for everything, but I could help you more. But for someone to even consider that, it's like, dang, like, what a cool deal. What a cool, like, again, not expecting it, but man, that was just really felt blessed even by the consideration. And to have people in the community that know my children that well, that like we're willing to sacrifice, whether it is $100 a year, who cares? Like, man, that's really cool. And so, and I think also at Harbor Cove, like I could in a lot of ways, be myself, in the sense of, going through, a difficult time. Like I felt like I could go through a difficult time and that was okay. Like I never felt like, yeah, I never felt judged or rushed through it. I never felt like, I felt like it was okay. And I think also because a lot of people, to one degree or another, knew various aspects of the situation. Like I felt supported, and Jeremy and Mark did like really just a beautiful thing that I was like, oh gosh, I don't know how to receive that. But everything was ending in my marriage, and um, you know, my ex-wife went to our church, for a long time. In fact, she preached from the pulpit at our church, which was strange now to think about that. But um, afterwards, like Jeremy was like, "Hey, I got a question for you." I was like, "Okay." He's like, "Do you want Amy coming to the church? Like, what is your opinion on that?" And I was like, after thinking about it for a week, I was like, "No, like, I don't want her there. Like, if she is there, it's gonna cause problems. It's gonna cause talk, and that is my safe place." And so I made that clear to my ex-wife. But before that, Jeremy was like, "Hey, like I talked to Mark, and if you're staying and this is your home, then if Amy does come, then we will, and she doesn't want to leave, then we will sit down with her and say, hey, we love you, but you're not welcome here." Which to me, they just handled it so beautifully, because it wasn't an adversarial thing. Right. It wasn't they needed to have this separate conversation. It was, if this happens, we'll have a private conversation and we will discuss the issue and we will tell her that just she is not welcome during the service.
That's got to make you feel great.
Oh, it did. I mean, just in the sense of like from a protective perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
And just that I could, again, be myself and worship and experience God in community. And there was another really beautiful thing. So my middle kid, whose biological name is Lily, now goes by the name Mal. And I don't think she does now, but for a year and a half or two, identified as trans. And so, I've got this complex, I had ex-wife that came out as a lesbian. I've got a middle kid that's autistic and is now trans. Talking about surgery and all these different things. And the beautiful thing in terms of our community was, her coming out to our discipleship family. And I had said, hey, like, Lily's going by the name Mal, and everybody there knows her as Lily. And so she kind of had this conversation with everybody and said, hey, like, just want to let you know, like, I'm trans and I want to, go by he, him, and go by the name Mal or Malachi or Mal. And so we just had this beautiful discussion, and nobody's angry, nobody's defensive, nobody's judging or lashing out. And, okay, can you tell us more, why that is? And we discussed that. But again, just this beautiful conversation where she was loved and she was cared for. And, a couple thoughts is I was like, man, there's not many communities that a kid can come out as trans to a very faithful Christian community and both feel the love of Jesus and feel cared for at the same time.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a pretty rare. I mean, I don't think she has any concept as to the uniqueness of that experience.
No.
And at the same time, you didn't have all of a sudden, oh, we agree with you. You didn't have, right. You had acceptance of her, but you didn't have agreement with what she was saying. And so you had this beautiful experience. And I remember, for my middle kid in particular, Jeremy was there and he said, well, can you help me understand, why you want to go by the name of Mal? I've, called you Lily your, whole life. Lily, Mal, why do you want me to call you Mal? And it was really interesting. And, he said, and she said, like, it's because, the name Lily reminds me of trauma and divorce. And so you really saw this really interesting blend and disassociation of, I want to identify as this person because Lily reminds me of the bad things in my life. So, which has been interesting, I mean, to engage from a faith perspective. Yeah. Your kid who you've known as your daughter your entire life, and then all of a sudden, okay, she's wearing a binder and, dressing androgynously and more masculine. talking about surgery, um, and in Washington State at the age of 13, she can legally get it done and not have consent.
Yep. Which is so wrong.
It's terrifying. And I will say with 100% certainty, as a parent who has had a trans kid, I would not support it. I don't. There is a very, very, very few cases where I would think, yes, that would make sense, but it would be very few. But so, and she is actually a great example of that, and why I have that opinion is now she goes by she, her, and she is super feminine and paints nails, and not that that needs to be for everybody, but you can see there's this phase of life that had I said yes, oh yeah, like I support you, like you're talking about permanent surgery. Like you're talking about all these things. And so, and that was this really interesting, one of the points of tension between us in terms of as a parent and in your faith. I talked to her multiple times, hey, like I love you, but you and I may disagree, and that's okay. That's called tolerance. We tolerate difference of opinion. But just because I disagree with you doesn't mean I love you any less, and doesn't mean I accept you. And I tell her over and over again when she was going through this stuff, identifying as trans, like, do I love you just as much as the other two? She goes, yeah. Do I spend just as much time with you as the other? Yeah. Okay. Do I care about you just as much? She'd say, yeah. And I was like, okay, great. You are on equal playing field as every other. But we may not see eye to eye, and that's okay. I'm a parent. Like that's okay. But because at first she's like, well, you don't accept me. No, I accept you. I accept how you are and who you are. I just don't agree with you. That's okay. Because you're not agree with me, and that's okay too. So so I think that in going back to the community, I think that those have been some really beautiful moments of a faith community, that have really, shaped things. And, the community, again, a number of them know, kind of what took place in my marriage, and nobody has come judging or slandering or anything, anybody, which is just great. So my kids are able to love their mom as much as they can and as much as they want, and make their own choices freely where they don't feel pressured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, it's amazing. It's an amazing story, and it feels like you've come through it in a really graceful fashion, even though it's been a painful.
Very painful, yeah.
But God grows us in those painful moments. That's probably how He shapes us the most, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we're going through those.
Yeah.
What did you learn about yourself going through that?
That's a good question. When I first got divorced, I didn't know if I could live by myself, in the sense of like just literally alone. And I found that I really like it. I'm an only child, but I've been married for almost 15 years. Basically as an adult, my entire adult life, almost, just except for college. And so I think I learned that. I think I've learned about myself that I can manage my energy levels and expectations and things and keep them fairly balanced, though I kind of do run on my red line. I think I can do that. And I think that I've learned in part to like take a step back and kind of watch God work and watch Him work slowly, and also work slower than I expected. And sometimes I'm okay at it, and sometimes I'm not at that. I want to rush things, but I think I've learned to say, okay, God, where are you working in my kids' lives? And you can see something come up like Max, and okay, hearing God's voice. Okay, well, God, that's where you're working, and how do I engage? So I think I've learned how to do that. Yeah, and I think I've learned how to be the only parent, the both parent in the sense of my oldest, as much as I can a mom figure and as much as I can a dad figure. Where if she wants to go shopping and I'm like, I don't want to shop. Or watch rom-coms and do crafts and all these different things.
Yeah.
And that's just not my cup of tea, but and I've seen her grow into such a beautiful person. She has been through a lot, and she was the oldest, so she remembers all of it. And she probably got it the worst, from her mom. And so I think that to see her go through that, to go through therapy, she's back in therapy, and I love her, and she's like, Dad, like there's things that's coming up that I think is response from my trauma with mom, and I need to go back and process those things, because if I don't process them, they're going to come up later in life, and I don't want them to. Yeah. And I was like, yes, like deal with it now.
Yeah.
Because, you're 17, you got plenty of time, and if you deal with them now, and you're going to have things that, and our therapist said, you're going to have, your dad's your safe person, but you're going to have stuff that comes up with your dad. Yep, you are. I was not a perfect person. I'm not a perfect person. And that's okay. And feel free to let me know what I did wrong. And I don't mind owning it. That's okay. It's not a problem. So, I think my goal when everything imploded with my marriage was that I didn't, I know so many people that their marriage implodes or they lose their job or whatever it is. And because of their decisions, they very negatively affect the faith of their children. And that was my number one goal. I was like, my faith is fine. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
But God, don't let me impact their faith, because this has nothing to do with it. It really doesn't in terms of their mom's decision. So let me at least just not. And I think I did a pretty good job.
That's awesome.
And I remember going through my divorce, and I remember being like, I want to, when my kids get older, be able to say I did everything that I could, and I loved their mom, and I cared for their mom even when it was really difficult, and I don't regret anything I said or I did. And I can look back and say that I don't regret anything I said or did. I never said a mean thing. I maybe got frustrated, of course, or hurt or whatever, but I don't look back and say, oh man, I was fine, except I was a perfect person, but I just don't have any regrets. And so
that's awesome. That's huge. That's huge, because those things can get out of hand, those emotions and the words can get out of hand in a hurry. And so being able to look back and say that's impressive, man. That's cool.
Yeah, I'm pleased with how I handled it. I joke, but I'm serious. I wouldn't wish that on anybody except for my ex-wife, but that's just so she knows what it's to go through, not from a vengeful place, but yeah, it sucks, but between that and going to the cult-like church for a while, I would still do it all again.
Yeah.
I love my wife.
Yeah.
There's no question about that.
That's cool.
I don't like her now, and I don't think she's a good person, but I don't regret marrying her.
Yeah.
And I don't say it just because I have 3 children. But no, there were tough times, but everybody has tough times.
Everybody has tough times. Yeah.
And so, and I don't regret going to crazy church, because I wouldn't be who I am today without it.
Right.
And I wouldn't have the depth of relationship with God that I know, and therefore my kids wouldn't either.
Yeah.
I mean, I had some really fun experiences. I remember going through the divorce, and there's this song that I absolutely love. It's called Pieces by Bethel, and it's the spontaneous version of it in particular that I love. I remember playing it for my kids, and I was like, hey guys, let's just kind of bow down and be with God. And, remember listening to it and just weeping, and in particular weeping over my kids, and just telling my kid, you have to understand, I deeply love you. And, my oldest is just bawling, and just this really powerful moment for all of us in God's presence. And that moment would never existed, had those things not happened. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, and your story's far from over.
It's true. Because I'm in a new relationship too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's been fun. It's been
How long have you guys been?
6 months.
Awesome.
Yeah, we went on a couple of years ago, and it just was not right time for me or my kids, and we've been friends since then. And my kids needed to be ready for me to date. They needed to be able to handle it. Yeah. And they just were not ready for years. And then back in April, my other two no, if you want to date, I'm okay with that. And then my oldest was I'm not ready. And I was like, kiddo, I love you, but she's like, yeah, I'm never gonna be ready. So yeah, it's fine. And so wanted to get some dates off of the dating apps, and that was an experience in and of itself. I'm from the pre-dating app world. And I realized I hate first dates. I would literally come home. When I'm overwhelmed, I will, not literally sensory deprivation, but I'll turn off the lights, turn off the sound, and just, sit on the couch in the dark and just sit there and be like, oh my gosh, there's too much.
I gotta decompress.
Oh, yeah. And I would go on a first date. I'm like, oh my gosh, 3 hours. I'm after the day, my oldest was like, oh my gosh, it wasn't even a bad date. But it's that constant, you're trying to be funny and engaging, but you're also trying to judge the other person.
Right. Oh, yeah. Right.
There's all these mental and emotional dynamics going back and forth. So I went on a few dates, and then my friend Carrie, at the time, my girlfriend, came over, and she didn't know I was dating, and I kind of relayed for her, and And she's like, oh my gosh, and so we talk, and then I was like, oh, I wonder about Carrie, and so I asked her out, and we've been dating since. It's been good. It's been like she's fun in the sense of like her faith journey has been very different, and her sense of faith is different from mine, and I appreciate that. She challenges me in like, but not directly, but just in who she is in her faith. Like she's much more of a spirit-led person than I am. I used to be that, but because of the negative experiences, I kind of edge away from that a bit. I'm not closed off to it completely by any means, but like I err on the side of like what is God? What can I practically do? God, what can you do through me? But the Holy Spirit's still there. But she errs on kind of both the like liturgical and rhythmic side of church and the Holy Spirit, which is this really interesting, unique combination. But like she challenges me naturally in that. And so, and like to relearn, like, because again, I think about 9 years of my marriage was healthy, but then, a number of years weren't. And to realize there are habits in my brain in terms of relationships that are not healthy because it came from an unhealthy marriage. And so to relearn like, oh, like this is what's healthy and normal.
Right. This is how things should go in a good conversation, right?
Yeah.
Nothing in give and take.
Yeah. And like in my marriage, there would be like a basic boundary set, and not in the wrong way, but like, hey, like whatever it was, and that was just overridden, and just blown out. And between Carrie and I, between each of us, it's like, hey, like this or whatever it is, in terms of I'm like, hey, I really want Chinese. She's like, oh, okay, great. Like, and I'm like, oh, I'm not used to that. I'm not used to, not like she's giving in, but like there's that ebb and flow where in my marriage, there's just for the last 5 or 6 years, there wasn't that. And you're like, oh, okay, like that's I like that, but I'm just not used to that, And I'm not used like in my marriage. I was used to always caring for my wife all the time on lots of different fronts, um, and now you have a mutual relationship that you care for each other, and I'm like, oh, I'm not used to this. I'm not used to also being the one being cared for, which is good and healthy and how it's supposed to be.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm not used to that. So it really is restorative of God through her to be like, no, like this is how it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
It wasn't supposed to be as much work as it was, and things like that. And she gets along with all my kids really well, which is great, and they all like her. So yeah, it's been a fun process, and and learning and communicating with somebody new and all.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. Are you in a men's group at all?
I'm not in a men's group. We do our discipleship family.
What's that?
That's basically a small group, more or less. They started a couple of years ago.
Who started?
Well, the church did. The church said, yeah, I think they started it and then never really kind of followed through with it. It was kind of, the intent of it was the idea of like a more committed small group to each other. So like we're committing to each other for a more extended period of time, or like more intentional growth was the idea. Okay. So we're in one with Jeremy and Claire Kidd and the Pansky family. Nice. So yeah, we meet every other Sunday when I have the kids. So
very cool.
Yeah, it's been good. It's kind of my chosen family in the sense of like, we'll go to each other's games and performances and things like that. And we celebrate usually a Christmas thing and Thanksgiving and birthdays and all that stuff.
Nice.
So yeah, it's been really good. And the older kids are joining the adult conversations now, which is fun. Yeah. So yeah, that's been good.
Awesome. Well, you looking forward to the holiday season, or is it one of stress for you?
It's not. I love the holidays. Yeah. I mean, I do love the holidays. They're a lot of fun. I love all the lights and the tradition. Yeah. And me and the kids have some very specific things, that we do as a family that's routine, and get to see my parents that are down in Oregon. And we get some nice things for Christmas, but it's not super stressful. It's the same budget every year, so it's not like, Christmas is fine for gifts and you enjoy it, but at the same time, it's like, no, it's about the traditions and the memories and the things.
Totally.
So, yeah, I do enjoy it. it'll be different with my middle kid not with us this year, there'll be moments of sad for that, I'm sure, and there'll be moments of like, no, like we can connect more and spend more time with each other because she's not here, which is hard to say, but that is reality. Yeah. And I do hope as she gets older and things like that, she learns a little bit of the mutuality of relationships of like it is a give and a take, and everybody cares for you, and nobody wants to be around somebody that you have to walk on eggshells constantly with. It's just not fun.
Yeah.
And so, um, and I think that has been hard with my other two. They don't understand her decision, and she made that decision to live with mom full time over some text that she and I sent, where she wanted to change some custody time, and I heard everybody disagreed on the day, literally, which day to change it to. And she said, okay, I'm living with mom full time. And so the other two are like, what? Well, sorry, why are you doing this? Like, no one, it doesn't make sense. And so I think with that, I think it's been good to see some breathing room. And I think the holiday season, even with that, will bring breathing room, to in some sense enjoy the traditions that we have.
Sure.
Because there is going to be functionless attention.
Yeah.
A lot less.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited for the holiday season. And then in February we're going down to Puerto Vallarta where I have a timeshare that we're going to go down and visit.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So
fun.
Yeah. So it'll be. I picked that up last year from a friend, and so we're going to go down there and visit for a week.
Awesome, man. Well, cool. Well, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I really appreciate your vulnerability, just your openness, and you're an awesome guy. You've been awesome. I've just come to appreciate you so much more just hearing you share from the pulpit. It's been really neat, really neat. So I've been super stoked about doing this just because of that. And one of the things that I really appreciate is that what you shared from the pulpit and we're vulnerable there, and that's a strength, man. That's a cool strength that it kind of shows me how healthy you are after going through a lot, and that's awesome. It really is. Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. And we love our little church, man. We've been blessed. We've been blessed with some really great people that are kind of, Jeremy and Mark and Kelly that are, kind of leading the charge and just trying to follow God, just trying to follow his lead.
Yeah.
And that's what's so cool, because that's what they really are trying to do.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
And that's amazing. I actually talked with Mark today, and I was talking to him about that and about how good a job he's doing. He just deflects. I'm just trying to do what God wants me to do.
All right, Mark, accept some credit, man.
Yeah, come on.
You are part of this. It's not all God. It's mostly God, but you are saying yes.
You're implementing it. You're the facilitator, man. So you're listening and you're hearing and you're following, and that's what we're all trying to do, right? Listen, hear, follow, right? And it's not very easy sometimes. It's not. And again, I've said this earlier, and I'll say it again: is that you went through this really gracefully, a really, really, really difficult time and difficult divorce. And I can tell you that I didn't have a divorce. I had a wife pass away, and I didn't deal with a lot of it at times as nearly as gracefully. And it hurt my kids, hurt my relationship with my kids. And I didn't had no one around me that to help me, that knew how to, really have God in their lives to help walk me through it. And I failed bad, and I'm still paying for that at some level with some of my kids. So it's tough. So good job, man.
Thanks.
Well done.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun and getting to chat.
Yeah.
It was a good time.
I love the sharing regardless.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah,
good.
it's great. Yeah. Good to meet Gracie and
Yeah. Thank you.